Alokesh is a well-known glaucoma figure in Calcutta. He is a fellow of Arvind Eye Hospital. At present, he is a consultant at Premda Birla Arvind Eye Hospital. And he will be talking about the role of OCT. Before he begins his talk, I would like to say that Dr. Alokesh is an excellent person with excellent work-life balance. And let's hear with him regarding his usage of OCT in glaucoma. Dr. Alokesh, please.
Thank you, Ravi. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Share my screen. Yeah, a very good morning to all of you. I'll be talking today on optical coherence tomography in glaucoma, the common pitfalls. I have no financial interest. So the question first arises is, why are we depending on such imaging techniques like the OCT? Because firstly, the visual damage is a relatively late phenomena, and disc photography or clinical examination even shows a higher inter-observer as well as intra-observer variations, and tests like visual field demand performance. The ocular hypertension treatment study showed that almost 86% of abnormal and reliable fields were not confirmed on retest, and it required 3 consecutive field tests to reliably confirm glaucoma or to confirm progression to glaucoma. Whereas on the other hand, it has been shown that both macular and nerve fiber layer thicknesses can have a positive correlation with glaucoma. We should think about the two types of OCTs, the time domain OCTs and the spectral domain OCTs. The time domain OCTs are gradually being phased out because the spectral domain OCTs have got some benefits. The time domain OCT measurements are dependent on the time lag on the reflected interference of the waves, whereas in frequency domain measurements, we get a more uniform bandwidth. In time domain OCTs, actually radial line B scans are performed.
Hello, sir. Can you hear us? There's an internet issue.
I think Dr. Alokesh is disconnected now. So we can't hear you. Kindly please reconnect.
Yeah. Yeah, am I audible now? I'm sorry, I think suddenly the internet connection dropped.
Yes, you're audible, sir.
So as we were talking about, in the time domain OCT, there are radial B scans which measure less than 5% of the mapped area, and the errors are extrapolated or propagated across a large area, and when they are measured, they miss small lesions which may fall in between the two lines of B scans. Whereas in a spectral domain OCT, the number of B scans are far more, about 241, and they enable us to get a 3-dimensional view and measures about 100% of the mapped area. So this is a picture showing how the radial A scans are done on the disc. And this is a picture showing how the results are calculated from the right eye in a clockwise fashion and in a left eye in an anti-clockwise fashion to give us the specific double hump patterns. So one of the most important things that we must remember is the signal strength value. What is the quality of the OCT that we have performed gives us? That is, a signal strength of 6 indicates a good quality in a time domain OCT. And in a spectral domain OCT, like for example, the Spectralis is the signal strength ratio of about 15 or more, which gives us the indication of a good quality of a scan performed. The other thing that we must remember is the centration on the disc, because the retinal nerve fiber layer closer to disc is thicker and those away fans out and gets thinner. So if the circle is displaced inferiorly, the superior sector will artificially appear to be thicker, while the inferior sector, which is farther away from the disc, will artificially be measured as thinner as compared to the normative database. So these are the basic printouts. I think all of us are familiar with it. Nothing much to go about it. And this color coding is dependent upon the percentage of the normal population against which it is scanned. So one most important thing about the parameters that we should remember is that an inter-eye asymmetry of greater than 30% is a significant difference. We'll illustrate a few cases. The first case is a male, 46 years of age, and there's a mean diurnal, which you can see is more or less within the normal range, slightly higher CCTs, highly myopic, with no family history. So these are his optic disc photographs, Redfi photographs. You can see that there is a slightly larger disc on the left side with a beta geometropy. And if you look at the HVF with a pattern deviation plot of the left eye, you find depressions in the scotomatous zone of the inferior arcuate region. But once you do the OCT, you find that the left eye has almost reached a floor effect. Now, is this an advanced effect of RNFL? Actually, no. Because if you look at the signal strength, you see that it is at the unacceptably low level. So once you repeat the OCT with the proper signal strength, the RNFL comes out to be much better. Even then, it shows some thinning of the RNFL, which we will explain as the changes in a myopic patient. And if we look at the repeat fields, we can see that because of better performance, it has come out to be normal. So one of the cardinal pitfalls that we have is that we don't look at the signal strength and we look at the color-coded map and conclude our decisions. So we should always look at the signal strength before judging the analysis to be abnormal. That is the first point. Coming to another case, 33 years of male, high myope, father POAG suspect, normal HVFs, normal diurnals. And if you look at the photographs, the Redfi photographs and the disc photographs, here, slightly larger, cup disc ratio. And when you look at the OCT picture, you find a generalized thinning of the retinal nerve fiber layer with a good signal strength ratio. So what is going on here is that if you look carefully along the major vessels, there are deficiencies of the retinal nerve fiber layer. These are in a high myope actually pseudo RNFL defects. And we have to remember that all myopes have low average nerve fiber layer thickness. So a significant proportion of these myopic eyes will be classified as outside normal limits when compared to the normative database. So this is a mistake that we should not commit. This is the normal person with no glaucoma. The third case is a middle-aged diabetic lady, a mean diurnal of 18 to 19, CCT slightly in the thinner range. And if we look at the disc picture, you can see very clearly that there is an inferior thinning in the right eye with a reabsorbing splinter hemorrhage and a corresponding RNFL defect. But once you do the OCT, you find that it is absolutely normal. So what is happening? When we do the visual fields, we see that there is an absolutely corresponding lesion here. And in the time domain OCTs per se, basically, as we were explaining, there are A scans which run radially at 30 degrees differences. So two-line A scans which run between these two areas and the lesion falls in between the two scans will result in a normal OCT. Case number 5 is a 44-year-old gentleman whose father has glaucoma, open angles with these pressure distributions. These are the visual fields of the patient and the retinal thickness maps. Now, if we go back, we see that basically this gentleman in the right eye again has an absorbing hemorrhage with a loss of RNFL, which is better evident on the Redfi photographs. So why is the OCT missing it, or actually is the OCT missing it at all? Actually, the OCT is not missing it, but the color-coded map is missing it. If you look here, there is a difference in the eye maps of 30 between the two eyes, and the inferior average also has a difference of 30. So between the right and the left eye, inter-eye variation of 30 measurement is significant. So actually, the OCT is picking up. It is us people who are interpreting it who are missing it. So always remember that inter-eye asymmetry of greater than 30 is always significant, and we should look for the clues of the clinical picture to show that the OCT can pick these lesions up.
I think.
Yeah, one second. It's the last slide. Okay, so basically we have a patient who was being treated for glaucoma based only on the
Sir, we can't hear you. Sir, if there is a problem, can I request you to please switch off your camera?
Okay, so hello.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
So you can conclude it.
The last slide. Yeah. So basically, when we look at the visual fields, we see a pie in the sky appearance, superior quadrantopia, and this is the calcified tubercular lesion which was causing it. So we should always remember that these common pitfalls in OCTs have to be avoided, and we should have a look at the whole picture and remember that 1 + 1 does not always make 2 in the human body. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alokesh, for the excellent talk. Since we are running short